So let's get started with the code explanation for 6.1 task. So firstly we'll be hearing the explanation of user model CS. So this class represents the user model. It contains properties for user data such as ID, email, first name, last name, password, hash, description, role, and the modified and created dates. Additionally, it includes methods to interact with the user data in the database. Now the get all users method retrieves all users from the database. The get user by ID retrieves a specific user by their ID from the database. The add user adds a new user to the database. So similarly, the update user will update the user. Delete user will delete a user from the database by their ID. And lastly, the update user credentials will update the user credentials such as email ID and password in the database. Now if we move to users.controller.cs, then we have an endpoint names as API user. So herein get all user is used as a get request to retrieve all users. The get user by ID is used to retrieve user by their ID. The add user model is a post request to add a new user. The update user is a put request to update an existing user. The delete user deletes a user to delete user by their ID. Now update user credentials is just a put request to update user credentials. Now if we move to map-controllers.cs, then this controller handles HTTP requests related to maps. So get all maps, this will retrieve the get request to get all maps. The get square maps will be using to retrieve the maps that are square. Similarly, get map by ID will get request to retrieve a map by its ID, suppose 1 or 2, etc. Similarly, add map will is a basically a post request to add a new map. In the same manner, the update map is used as a put request to update an existing map, and delete map is a request to delete a map by its ID. Now, if we move to robotcommands.controllers.cs, then here in get all robot commands, this get request is used to retrieve all robot commands. The get move commands is used to move the robot. The get robot command by ID. This get request will use to retrieve a robot command by its ID only. Similarly, the add, update, and delete commands will be used. Now for robot command access.cs. Here we have a namespace called robot controller API.persistence, and we have classes such as robot command data access, in which we are having methods. Firstly, the get robot command method. It will retrieve all robot commands from the database. Secondly, the get robot command by ID will retrieve a robot command by its ID, as we have discussed earlier. Now in the map data.access file, in this we are having methods such as get all maps, get square maps, get map by ID, add map, update map. These are similar commands which are used to update the map function. Suppose get square map retrieves square maps from the database, and add map add a new map to the database. Similarly, the check coordinates int id, int x, int y. It will check if your coordinate belongs to a specific map or not. Next we have is the user data.access.cs. In this we are having methods such as get all users, get user by ID, add user, update user, delete user, and update user credentials. These are all similar. So let's move on to the program CS file and see what is happening there. In this program file, it configures services such as controllers, API Explorer, endpoint, and Swagger documentation generation. Now, basic authentication is added using a custom basic authentication handler. Herein, authorization policies are defined, including admin only and user only. Now, Swagger documentation is configured with a custom description and contact information. The HTTP request pipeline is configured based on this environment. Also, the static files and HTTP redirection are also enabled so that authentication and authorization middleware are added up. Now, to check if it's running and is currently being authenticated, we'll have to move to Postman app to see the output. So let's see. So for us to check the output, we have copied the URL of the localhost and placed it into the get request section. Now we have authorized the maps. So the authorized URL we have sent here. Now as we'll try to send the request, then it will show the 401 unauthorized status. It is because this arises when we are not selecting the basic authorization. It is likely because our API is set to up to require authentication by default, and by default it is set to as no authorization. Now, this means it expects some form of authentication header in the request. Now, we have specified that in our code. If we want certain endpoints to be accessible without authentication, we can just certainly uncomment or comment it the authentication part in the code, and we can adjust the API configuration to allow unauthenticated requests to those specific endpoints. But for now, we have authentic authenticated this map section. So we'll do this by basic auth. Now we have set the ID password as karthik@gmail.com and password as 1234. Now when I try to send the request, then it will show me all the IDs. See, now the status is OK with all the IDs. Here the authorization policy is set to as admin only. This attribute is applied to the controller class of the API controller and the root from the root of API/maps. That totally specifies that the API maps endpoint is accessible only to the users who meet the requirements of the admin only policy. This might be defined as elsewhere in the code, but mostly it requires the presence of specific claims in the user identity. In this case, only users who have been assigned the admin only, which users admin only means that the users who are entering the password as 1234 and the ID as karthik@gmail.com are the admins. If a user doesn't have the necessary role claim, they will receive a 403 forbidden response or the unauthorized error. So this was all about the output explanation. Thank you.